All right, hi everybody. Welcome to Info Night here. This is a little strange with the microphone. Also, I need to warn you in advance, there's a little piece of this rug right here that is like kind of angled up, so I've tripped on it 3 times already in the last half hour, so if I die, that may happen. Hopefully not. That would be a bad end to Info Night. But anyway, thank you so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. Join us in giving a round of applause for WeWork for hosting us. Thanks to them. That's Grace over there, our community lead, and she's just been a fantastic host. They always are. We moved in here about 6 weeks ago, maybe 7 weeks ago. January 1st was our first day here. We were previously at 1871 over in the Merchandise Mart, and we have just fallen in love with WeWork, really love being here, and they've been a fantastic host and friend to Designation. Our space is actually right through there, past the giant wall of Post-its. So we have a little workspace back in the back there. It's a little private space and really easy to get to when you're in the building, so really happy that we're so close and convenient to everything. So the point of tonight is to just kind of introduce Designation. All of you are on our mailing list, or you follow us on social media, or you've applied to the program or expressed interest in the program. How many people would say they know very little about Designation tonight? Raise your hands. A couple, but good. Good. This night is going to be for you, for sure, to be able to learn a lot about it. We're going to cover, the majority of what we're going to cover is sort of information about the program, to be able to think about and look at whether this might be a good fit for you, a good investment for you, for an upcoming cohort. We're also going to talk about working with Designation as a client, because we do work with live clients from all over the world. That's a big part of our curriculum. So if you're here for that reason, you're interested in working with us as a design team, we'd love to be able to talk about that too. And then some information about hiring graduates at the end of the program. And then we're also going to talk about things like admission and a lot about the curriculum and all kinds of other details. So this was up earlier, but again, make sure whenever you feel moved by the spirit, please grab a donut over here. We also have a lot of drinks, and again, there's coffee and beer on tap. They turn the taps off eventually, but feel free to enjoy those. Restrooms are down this hallway, down here, and then to the right. Really easy to get to, and then the Wi-Fi is WeWork guest, and no password is needed for that. Before I get started, any questions? Any beginner questions? I'll give you the answer to the beginner question we always get. Is it Designation or is it Designation? How many people in this room thought it was Designation? You know what, don't raise your hand. We don't want to know. But we are Designation. We're really happy to be here. So we wanted to kind of introduce, again, a lot about the program and tell you a lot about what we're doing here. And feel free at any point to raise hands, ask questions, rant and rave. We would love to hear from you. There's going to be time for a lot of Q&A later on after we're sort of done with all the slides. But feel free at any point to raise your hand, make sure that I see you, and then we'll be able to ask you what you'd like to talk about. So before we get to the details about the curriculum and a lot of other information about Designation, we want to talk about some of the big picture things that Designation is and isn't. You probably have, if you've read about us through Course Report or SwitchUp or Quora or some other sites where there's information about design programs like ours, you may have heard the term Design Bootcamp. That's a very popular term that is, has made its way around in the last 5 years or so. And there are a lot of programs out there that call themselves Design Bootcamps. And we are not one of them, though we have a lot of things shared with Design Bootcamps. Primarily the length of the program, what we focus on, sort of a more individual focus, and getting people prepared for a career in design that's a lot faster than a 2-year or 4-year program. A lot about boot camps promise you that you are able to go to a boot camp as the first step that's needed before you need to take your career. And it's really not about sort of changing your entire life, your entire career, switching into something brand new for design. Designation is a lot about your individual experiences before the program. So we have people who've gone through Designation who've been teachers and lawyers, and we had a pastry chef. And we had a lot of people who were baristas and servers, and people who were, teachers and did marketing and were in computer science, all kinds of backgrounds. And it's really great to be able to see them take what they practiced and what they did on a daily or monthly basis in those other jobs and apply them to the field of design. Design is not about sort of the practice of doing something. It's about understanding people. It's about working with people. And any background that you have when working with people, working in service, any experiences that you've had in doing something for someone else and creating in any capacity, it's all valid. It all matters a whole lot. And so we're really happy that Designation is about incorporating past experiences, past either that's professional career backgrounds or it's just interests. We find a lot of people who come through Designation are people who were interested in design. They taught themselves Photoshop when they were kids, or they were really interested in it. Maybe a voice in their head said, you can't do that. You have to do something that makes more money, or you have to do something that's more of a traditional background. And we hear that all the time. And Designation is definitely for the people who were curious about design, were passionate about design for some reason, and they were ready to practice it. They're ready to make it a career. Another thing about boot camps in general is that they're all about teaching tools. They believe that learning a process or learning a particular type of program like Sketch or Illustrator, for example, or Photoshop, those are the key to getting a new career. And what we've learned from doing this for about 4 years now is that it's not about learning a specific thing. There's not a checklist that you can fill out to become a designer. What we've learned is that design is about always learning, being ready to learn. And what we do teach those design tools. We teach Sketch and Illustrator and Proto.io and Envision and all those other tools that are important for design. But Designation is really about the place where you begin a lifetime of learning, because being a designer is always about learning more tools that come out and replace the ones that we currently have. The people around you to gain empathy, to understand how to design for people and create solutions for them, clients, and all kinds of situations that you may find yourself in. And that's what we really strive to teach here, is how to learn and how to be open to learning, how to learn from the people and the situations around you and the environment that you're in. That's a big part of Designation, something we're very proud of. That it's not just going to be, I learned a particular program. We are definitely focused on design. We are a design program. We call ourselves an immersive design program. Design is such a big part of it. I'm going to say that word so many times tonight that it's going to probably lose all meaning. And design as a sort of skill set, as an area of professional practice, as a set of skills is incredibly important. It's a massive part of our curriculum, and it's a massive part of this experience. But design is really about communication. The communication is the center of everything that a designer does. You have to be able to create something for someone else that communicates an idea or values or business objectives. You have to communicate with each other on your team. You have to communicate with your creative director or your clients or whomever else. So communication in all its forms, written, oral, ways to write, ways to communicate, ways to act out, all of that is really important. That's a big part of the Designation experience. We are incredibly difficult. We are a very challenging program. That's what boot camps are. They're meant to sort of squeeze in 2 to 4 years of a design education into a very small amount of time. In this case, in our program, that's 24 weeks. We are definitely difficult, but we are not hard for the sake of being hard. We believe that out of that difficulty comes reward, and reward is always earned. It's never given. So the people, and we believe that we have, 473 graduates, 471 graduates by now. We believe that almost all of them would agree that the hard work was worth it, that there was a reward at the end of it, which is not just a career, but again, that sort of answering the voice that said, I want to be passionate about design. I want to do something that engages my creative side. And we're really happy to be able to provide that. That's our wall of Post-its right over there, and we are definitely a home for a lot of people. We have a lot of folks who come through the program who are from other cities, from other countries, and Designation is their home for 3 months or 6 months. And it's a place where people spend 12, 13, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, and we intentionally make it so that it is welcoming, it is inviting, because it's a place that there's a lot of time spent inside. We are absolutely team-centered. I've been saying the phrase, we practice team-centered design here instead of user-centered design, but every single thing that you do at Designation is done as part of a team, whether that's a team of designers or a team of outside people, clients, creative directors, graders, TAs, whomever. There's always the need to work as part of a team. Collaboration centric, we are absolutely that. Along with teamwork, there's always opportunities and needs really to work with other people, to collaborate for a shared vision and a shared outcome. That is absolutely the professional practice of design. It's always a collaboration between the client and the designer and various people in the team, and that's a huge, huge part of our practice here. Again, Post-its are everywhere. We should own stock in 3M at this point, but Post-its are used to be able to collect individual points of data. And we have a lot of data. We're talking about hundreds of points of data across a project or at any given day, where that people are exploring all of the insights that they've gained from interviews, all the points they've collected from various people that they've spoken with, or things they've learned about each other, and they put them together and they start to make sense of that data. And so data is a really important part of the designation experience. We absolutely are, we need insights, we need facts, we need to analyze those facts, synthesize all those insights and facts together to come up with a next step to be able to understand how we design for other people. So you'll see a lot of that throughout the designation experience also. We are huge on feedback. Feedback is unbelievably important, and we're going to talk a little bit later about what types of feedback we provide, but feedback is really important not only to get, but also to give. Everyone at designation practices over and over and over again how to give feedback, because you have to be able to talk with other people around you about how their work is. Is it successful? Is it meeting the needs that are outlined? And in addition, you also get feedback all the time and how your work is has been perceived. Is it successful? Where are there opportunities for improvement? That is a continuous thing, a loop that happens over and over again at designation. We're lucky to have phone booths here at WeWork, but a big part of the experience is not just working in a team, but it's also going off on your own and being able to reflect on what you've learned, be able to synthesize all the information you've gained, be able to understand what you did that day, what you learned, how you learned it, how you failed, and how you succeeded beyond that failure. There's a lot of reflection that happens. We encourage daily journaling at the end of every day, and journaling is not, dear diary, today I met somebody cute and I ate a burger. It's more about, well, I had a really hard time learning this thing. I didn't really understand my client, and I have to figure out how I'm going to be able to understand them more tomorrow. And we really encourage reflection as an opportunity to measure how success can be achieved, and measure how insights can be achieved, and make sure that it's something that is a big part of the experience here. Also, we love to celebrate. Like, we are absolutely we love to celebrate individual people and teams, their accomplishments, learning something, mastering something, which mastery, as you guys know, takes a long time to be able to do. That is always worth celebrating. So we really believe that joy and celebrating people and their achievements is a big part of this experience. It has to be, because if it isn't, it's going to be a very, very long 6 months. And finally, we are lucky enough to be dog friendly. WeWork is dog friendly. Designation is dog friendly. This is Henry, one of our office poodles. We also have Roscoe, who's a mutt, and occasionally Leon, who's also a smaller mutt. They are around a lot, and they really fill us with joy. So hopefully you also love dogs. I want to introduce the people. This is on screen here, everybody who's on our staff. But I want to introduce a few of these people who are here today and ask them if they could please tell the room what they did before they came to designation. So we'll start over here with Aaron, our CEO.
Aaron Fajolak. I've been in Chicago for 6 years, designation for all 4. And I started in consulting, working as a forensic accountant prior to designation.
Doug.
I'm Doug, forensic accountant, so it's like CSI. I was a creative director doing pharmaceutical campaigns, so I was working on more, doing TV commercials, but I love it.
Dan.
There's so much more than just that. I'm Dan. I've been with designation since 2014, so nearly full time. I have a background, I have a degree in painting, so a degree in fine art, but my professional background prior to designation runs the gamut from traditional graphic design for design identity to front-end development, and then the fabric between them with UX.
And then James, who just walked into a trap. We're asking staff members to speak about what they did before designation.
Oh, cool. Prior to joining Designation, I was a front-end developer at a startup in St. Louis. My background is in psychology and graphic communication, specifically graphic design. That's what I was doing prior to this.
Awesome. We have Courtney, our community manager, back here.
Hi, I did nonprofit digital media, and I lived in Massachusetts, and I got here in September.
Just in time for the weather.
Yeah.
And we have Sarah.
My name's Sarah. I've been doing social media marketing for about 6 years. Before Designation, I was at the agency here in Chicago, Rise Interactive. Yeah.
And then one of our designers in residence who is a graduate of the program, this is Caitlin over here.
Hi, I worked in scientific research and education.
Yeah. She loves nature, which is nature that's really neat.
That's pretty neat.
And myself, I was the formerly communications director for an agency, digital agency here in town called DSA Partners. As you can see, like, we have tremendously varied backgrounds. We are, I think, a great representation of what Designation is here to do, which is be able to provide people from all backgrounds a really, really excellent immersion into digital design, be able to become an expert in that. So we come from all backgrounds ourselves. We know what it's like to switch careers, sometimes multiple times. And it's really, really valuable to have that perspective, we think, for everybody who comes to the program. So thanks everybody for saying hello. Everybody who spoke tonight, please feel free to talk with them after the program, after tonight ends. We'll all be around eating whatever donuts are left. So a couple things that I think are really important for us to share with you, which is some of our primary values. A lot of boot camps will not necessarily publish this information, or maybe they haven't really figured it out themselves, but we have a really strong belief in quite a few things at Designation, not just in what we practice, but in what we encourage all of our designers to practice also. Empathy and service are truly valuable. They are the designer's primary weapon to be able to understand what's happening, not just in the world, but interpersonally and with people that you're designing for. We have to do what we can to understand as many people as possible if we're going to design for them. Discovery is something that's really important. We encourage designers to always be inspired. We'll sometimes do a show and tell where people just talk about the cool things they've seen, the apps they've discovered, the plugins, any websites, any really interesting, funny memes. We want to see it all because that's part of that exploration that keeps going. And as a designer, you have to be able to explore all the time. Perseverance, we talk about that, and resiliency, because failure is a fact of life for designers. It happens on a giant scale where you accidentally do something that costs a lot of money, or it's on a small scale where it's a change that very few people notice. But there's always a time that failure impacts a designer, and we encourage our designers to get comfortable with that, to understand that that's just a part of the way it is. It's always an opportunity to learn something new, to be able to say, I know I will never have to make this mistake again, and be able to improve their process or even their understanding about other people. We practice minimum viable product building, so we call that MVP. And iteration is a really important part of the experience here. Perfectionists have a really hard time in boot camps and at Designation. You have to be able to design something that is good enough. And then be able to release it, be able to put it out there for feedback, and get feedback on that, and make improvements, and then re-release it. That's a huge part of the curriculum, not just at Designation, but for being a professional designer. Flexibility, there's always a time where flexibility is needed in the professional world, and certainly at Designation. There might be a pivot in the design process, an unforeseen change, the client may disappear for a couple days. Anything might happen. We have to be flexible and be ready to go. So there's a lot of need to do that in every area of life, and definitely Designation too. And then finally, something that's also difficult for a lot of people to grasp is ambiguity. There are a lot of places in the world that there are right and wrong answers to. A lot of professions where there are very clear right and wrong answers. There's a yes or no, there's a correct or incorrect. And in design, there are very, very few things that are like that. Design is all about understanding all the possible directions that are in front of you and being able to use your thought process to pick the one that's going to be most advantageous. It is really difficult to be able to sort of easily say an easy yes or no on something. We have to be able to understand how to weigh those options and understand what's going to come, not just immediately in the future, but further on down the process. So that's a really, really big part of it. A few things we practice, these are things that we hear about or we tell designers about quite often. I do, we do, you do is something that we practice all the time, which is the creative director, the instructor shows you how to do something, then does it together with you, and then trusts you to be able to do it at the end of that. 3 than me, we also ask people to reference all the resources that are out there in the world, the internet, workshop decks, resources that other people in your cohort or people that you know have uncovered, and then ask the creative director for that answer, because usually the answer has already been given in some capacity. I already mentioned MVP, minimum viable product building. That's just a huge, huge part of digital design today and a big part of Designation. ASK is the type of feedback that we encourage everybody to give and also receive. ASK is the acronym for actionable, specific, and kind. So feedback, there must be a next step associated with it. It must be very specific to a part. You can't just say, I like it, or I don't like it, or it's not working. You have to hone in on more of the details. And then kind, in that there needs to be an element of constructive criticism behind it. It cannot just be that sucks and you suck and go away. That way you will never hear that in any form of Designation. It will always be constructive, and we really encourage everybody to practice that. We practice the Stanford D-School model of design practice, which is empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Just about every project in your Designation will follow that model. So you're always understanding the users and the people around you. You're defining the problem. You're creating potential solutions to the problem. You create the ultimate solution that you want to be able to go forward with, and then test it on people and be able to repeat that process over and over again. And similar to the ambiguity I mentioned on the last screen, we say the phrase, it depends, kind of a lot here. And again, that's because there are lots of questions that don't have the right answer. We want to make people understand their own thought process and make it as strong as possible to be able to come to the best possible decision. A couple of tools that we use here, you can see here, design tools. We use Illustrator. Oh, that's supposed to be, there's not a program called Photoshop. It's supposed to be Photoshop. I apologize for that. Sketch, Axure, Proto.io, and Vision and Principle is a great animation software that we use. It's really easy to pick up. Team tools, we use Google Drive, Google Slides, Keynote, and PowerPoint. Depending on team's comfort level with each of those, they may choose whichever one they want to be able to present their work to clients or in internal presentations. Hardware software, we use Canvas, Slack, email, specifically Gmail, Google Calendar, and then Apple laptops are a necessity in the digital design world. We have get a 6% or 7% discount with Apple. So if you need a laptop incoming with the program, we want you to order through us because we can give you that. And then we also use a ton of pencils, paper, Post-its, and whiteboards, lots of process things that are really about working through solutions very quickly, trying to come to an understanding and be messy about it. There's a lot of mess, a lot of sketching, a lot of practice work that comes with being a digital designer, and we definitely practice that here. Any questions so far before I get into the curriculum? I'm going to take this opportunity to awkwardly drink some water. Okay. So this is sort of the meat of this presentation. We wanted to be able to kind of talk about what you can expect to get week by week or phase by phase from Designation. And there's a lot. We don't have time in this hour to be able to talk about every single part of this program. There's a ton that you will experience when you get here, a ton that's in our, you can talk about in your application or in your interviews, a lot of information that we'll be able to provide. But this is sort of a top level understanding of the Designation experience. In the first 12 weeks, which is actually our virtual phases, you do this at home, wherever you live. The first 12 weeks are really how to design. It's about tools and processes. You learn really the fundamentals about all the tools that you need to practice, and it's much more of an instructional environment. We call our creative directors in that phase instructors because there's a lot of instruction that's necessary in those first 12 weeks. After that, in weeks 13 to 22, the next 10 weeks, we really shift the focus. At this point, we've trusted you to know the tools, to really understand them, be able to use them very quickly. After that, we get into much more higher level thinking and processes and practices, and it really changes to the idea of how to be a designer. And there's a big difference between designing and being a designer. And this is all about interpersonal communications, about presentation, about resiliency, about iteration, about taking feedback in much more, much stronger ways. And then the final part of the program is the last 2 weeks of the program, which is our career phase. And that's different. Again, it changes again for those last 2 weeks. The focus of those weeks is how to tell the story of your growth as a designer. And just the same way that it's changed from the doing to the being a designer, it's a huge change to be able to tell the story. This is where it's really, really heavy on communication, on presentation, on storytelling, and there are lots of things that are different about that phase. So let's go through it step by step. Design Essentials is the first phase. That's weeks 1 through 6. It's really about learning the fundamentals of UX, interaction design, information architecture, and UI design. We go through each of those step by step. Basically, this is just a small amount of things that we introduce and ask you to get comfortable with in Design Essentials. Not master necessarily, but be able to get comfortable with them. Here, I'll get over on this side here. And that's everything from, big sort of practices, user-centered design, information architecture, design process, to specific tools and programs like Sketch and Vision, to bigger, process parts of the design experience, like user research, ideation, prototyping, style tiles, creating prototypes, things like that. The virtual phases, Design Essentials and the one after it, are the only phases that really have a strict sort of cadence of what happens week by week. So as you go through this, you really build from the kernel of research and design and the UX essentials in week 1. Then you get further into research, synthesis, and ideation in week 2, the fundamentals of interaction design in week 3. In week 4, you build on that to virtual design. Week 5 is UI design. Week 6 is testing and iteration. So everybody, regardless of what interest you have, what track you want to pick, goes through this entire curriculum. So you're always getting the introduction to both UX and UI and everything in between. A couple of big features of Design Essentials. There are multiple styles of learning available. That includes text, video, meetings, and those meetings are in groups. They're also one-on-one with the instructor. You get regular feedback on projects that comes within 72 hours. And then you get to pick your track towards the end of that, about week 5. You pick your track, whether it's going to be UX or UI. And by that point, in week 5, you've gotten some introduction to both the UX and the UI side. And in theory, you're able to make a pretty informed decision on which one you feel like you're stronger at. If you don't know that yourself, that's what the instructor, in this case, James, is here to talk about. That's what the graders are here to talk about. They're there to be able to say, well, let's talk about which track you might be stronger at, based on the areas in which you've shown great success or more of a inkling for. That may be the track that you want to do, or maybe something that might be more challenge for you. Especially, we see sometimes that people who have a graphic design background, some of you may be in this room have a graphic design background, may want to go into UX because they feel like they've kind of gotten some of the basics of UI already, or they may want to continue into UI to become really, really excellent visual designers. So there's a lot that goes into that. Every decision, every conversation about this is absolutely one-on-one. It is for sure, it comes out of a required one-on-one meeting with the instructor to be able to really talk about these things, because there's a lot writing it. There's 18 more weeks of the program that you have to be able to focus on UX or UI. We want everybody to make a truly informed decision about which track they're going to pick. So I want to show a few examples of things that actual designers in our program have created over the course of Design Essentials. This gigantic, scary, tiny type spreadsheet here is a competitive analysis where they are looking at 9 competitors on each of these categories and really defining strengths and weaknesses of each one. This is something that everybody does. Everybody gets comfortable with creating a competitive analysis. A user persona, being able to understand who the ideal user for this product is. And in this case, it's someone named Joanne, who has goals and motivations and frustrations and uses a particular type of app most often. They create application maps, which help you understand how a user goes through a particular tool, where are the options they have to be able to switch, to go deeper into certain features, to be able to go back and forth between pages, and be able to come out of it with certain actions. And then they'll go forward into creating wireframes, and this is really taking all the research and all the understanding of the work to be able to create something that is much clearer about where buttons go, how people will actually use it. And this starts to resemble much more of an app that we're all familiar with, especially on the phone. There's certain sections that make a lot of sense. There's a hierarchy to this, and understanding, again, where people click and what that click takes them to. Style tiles on the UI side, this is something in week 4 and week 5 where they'll create sort of an overall look at what the app might look like, and they'll start to understand some of the logo choices, some of the color palettes. They'll create some, an understanding through adjectives of what the app or what the tool is supposed to do and what it should look like and how it should feel. And then they go forward into high fidelity screens, so really building out the entire design system, figuring out the really strong color palette, a lot of the elements in this and how it really should work for everybody. And then they go forward and create a prototype in Envision, where this is something that is really, you're able to really understand how you go from screen to screen, what the buttons are going to look like, how they function, how everything works together. Any questions about Design Essentials? This is just, again, like the 3-minute version of this phase, because we're talking about 6 weeks here. Design Essentials is about a 10 to 20 hour a week commitment. We expect that people will have a full or part-time job while they're working Design Essentials, because they are usually trying to make money and be able to be financially secure for later when they have to do the program full-time. And again, you do Design Essentials from wherever you live. So if you're in Chicago, in the suburbs, people from all over the world, they will take part in Design Essentials wherever they live and be able to work on it through their schedules. Yes?
When you're during Design Essentials, do you have access to things?
No, you do not have access to WeWork during the virtual phases. It's only in the in-person phases. So starting in week 13 is when everybody comes to this space and gets set up over there. Any other questions? Yes?
Virtual phase, is it more like do it on your own time, or is there like a set time?
The virtual phase and Design Essentials, definitely there's a lot that you're going to be asked to do on your own. There's usually like a couple of assignments or deliverables that are required at any given time, and you have to be able to balance your time to do those. There are some check-ins that happen every so often, but it really is more of a self-guided experience, because we know that somebody might be working a 9-to-5 job in Chicago, they might be working a 9-to-5 job in Dublin or India or somewhere, and their schedule is going to be really, really different. Anything else that I haven't added, James, that is worth talking about?
I'd say that's about accurate. We do stagger. To answer that question a little bit more fully, we do stagger our assignments. So you have things that are turned in on Wednesdays and things that are turned on Sundays, because if you don't know who your primary audience is, it's going to be really hard for you to define a problem that they have. So making sure that everything builds off of each other and that there's good harmony between those deliverables is really essential to Design Essentials. So while there is some, that was a dad joke for Aaron. So while there is some leniency as far as like if you're in a different time zone, because I've had people in Korea, I've had people pretty much in everywhere that's not Africa. We haven't bridged to get Africa yet. Africa's next. But no, I would say like we always kind of make accommodations where we can.
We did have one designer once from Mauritania, which...
No, Mauritius.
Mauritius.
Off the coast of Madagascar.
Off the coast of Madagascar, there we go. So your homework is to look that up on Google Maps. That was exciting, that cohort. So virtual phase is, again, it's virtual, you're working from wherever you live. The commitment in virtual phase is much more like a full-time job. We do expect about 40 to 50 hours of time here because there's about the same amount of things that come up over the course of this. And there are 2 tracks that work concurrently here. So there's the UX track and the UI track. And this is sort of a combination of those 2 tracks, but it really is turning the basic knowledge that you've gained in Design Essentials into more of that mastery level. You have to become really proficient with the software and best practices, and basically the same deliverables happen in the virtual phase as they did in Design Essentials. And that's because that iterative learning, to be able to go through the whole process again, is incredibly important to be able to understand it. You go through it faster, you go through it better, it's a little bit easier. You're able to bring in more things into that process and be able to explain it better to other people and take better feedback on it. So there's a lot of really great things that happen by repeating that experience. On the UX side, weeks 7 through 12, again, have a pretty specific theme to them. So week 7 is user research, and then UX synthesis and strategy, information architecture, interaction design, wireframing and prototyping in week 10, evaluating design in week 11, and then week 12 is that iteration and refinement. Again, that was very similar to what happened in week 6 in design essentials. On the UX side, in the virtual phase, they'll be doing things like creating user interviews and be able to map them in a lot of different areas. They'll be creating task flows that allow you to understand what happens if then as you go through various pages of the app. Creating journey maps to really understand a user in very specific ways, the highs and the lows of their experience in working with this app, be able to walk them through step by step and understand where their frustrations are likely to be and being able to solve for those problems. Another example of a user flow that's much more specific, being able to go through step by step and then what happens at these various buttons, the information that's needed here. People create paper prototypes, which this is all hand-drawn, hand-sketched on a dot grid background, and then somebody would take a picture of it, upload it to a prototyping software, and be able to have these actually click. And that's, to me, that's the coolest thing, to be able to have something that's on paper and you can actually tap it and be able to go to the next screen and work with any of these sort of tappable areas. There's low fidelity wireframes that happen here, very similar to what was created in Design Essentials. Another example of a heuristic evaluation. So you're evaluating the tool that you've created on various in various ways to be able to understand how it's working or not working with specific issues, and then how you can make them, how you can improve them in the next version. And then also usability testing. So these are evaluation scenarios. When you test your product with somebody, you ask them to do very specific things, and they are likely to take a few minutes. You seek feedback on each of these individual tasks and be able to understand, is this effective, is this successful, is it working well or not working well. The wireframes get higher fidelity here, where you start to really understand more about the hierarchy of the page and be able to understand how things are going to work in more detail with each other. And then also creating high fidelity wireframes that are then annotated to be able to understand and explain to somebody else how each of these features works, each button, each pop-up window, each feature of this tool, how it's going to work. That's very, very important. On the UI side, again, in those 6 weeks, you start with principles of visual design, go into branding. Interaction design is the same in week 9 as it is on the UX side. Week 10 is mobile design, week 11 is web design, and week 12 is communicating through design. So this is a little bit broader, but you can see some of the process items that come out of this. There's a lot of sketches that happen. Again, this is sort of the continuing into the theme of really getting ideas down on paper as fast as possible and making sense of them later, but really trying to understand them at a very, very basic level. Creating a visual competitive analysis on the UI side is understanding how other tools and other apps do things better or worse, and be able to look at the screens and how they function. Creating a style tile, which is very basic, understanding of what a tool is on a visual level. So how it, the colors, the moves, some of the typography, some of the other elements that you want to just figure out on a really, really basic level. Creating some logo concepts and understanding the differences between them, how you might be able to move forward with a specific logo. Creating a mobile user flow, which looks at a lot of the revisiting the wireframes and understanding how to improve them, where to make changes, and how somebody's going to walk through this from more of a visual perspective. Creating micro interactions, which are those little wonderful moments that you use an app for that give you some type of joy or satisfaction to really help the process, help you move through that in some way. So how this this feature will move to the side, how there might be a carousel here, how a drawer might open up or close, being able to explore these. And again, they're doing this with pencil and paper, so it's really fast. It's really great to just get these down very quickly. Creating a user flow, again, on the UI side. So all these elements, design elements, have been built out. The color palette has been pretty set. A lot of the button elements and other things have been figured out. So they're trying to walk you through how this would work in terms of bigger screens. We call them key screens. Creating a marketing site. Is this your marketing site? Yeah, Caitlin did this a few months ago. I'm pretty sure. I'm glad I remembered that. So really looking at all of the design elements and how they all work together And then creating a style guide, you saw this earlier in the user flow for the same project called HabFit, but really looking at all the elements and saying the typography is going to be this size. The buttons are going to be this in various states. They're going to look like this. Here's the color palette. Here's how we're going to use shadows. All kinds of things like that have been figured out in the style guide. The style guide is basically the final product that's been broken apart into pieces. Those pieces are analyzed and then handed off as ready to a developer to be able to say, when it comes time to create this for real, these are the rules that you're going to follow. And then as you can see here, a lot of really excellent key screens that have been developed for the same project. A really cool thing about the virtual phase, you get to design as part of a team. Teamwork in the Design Essentials is really a little bit more about feedback groups and be able to critique each other. But in the virtual phase, everybody in UX, the UX track and the UI track works as part of a team of UX designers or UI designers. And that's the beginning of a really important step for the in-person phases when you're working with a team at all times. But it's really also about learning how to get over the difficulties of working with a team that's remote. If your teammates are across the world or in the other parts of the city or wherever, it's a challenge. It's a great challenge to be able to work with them, to be able to use the collaboration software that everybody takes advantage of, to be able to work with them and communicate effectively and be on the same page. We also have scheduled check-ins with instructors and TAs. I believe Tuesdays at 4 or 5 o'clock is when there's a lesson. And so everybody gets together on Zoom, which is our video software, and really talks through the problem, goes through the work that's been created. There's a lot of one-on-ones that happen with instructors and our graders. At the end of the virtual phase, there's a great again, another example of something that's going to come up in a better form in the immersion phase, but it's the final presentation to a panel of critics. So you actually present your work, again, over Zoom to a panel of people who are there to give you that actionable, specific, and kind feedback. They're to tell you what is going well, what's working really well, where are the specific places that may need to be revisited, and how to kind of improve from there. So it's a really valuable thing to get that feedback. It's not just from the instructor or the TA, but it's from a lot of professionals who are coming in and really giving you that feedback in a very specific setting. Any questions about the virtual phase? One more drink.
You earned it.
Hey, thanks, Courtney. Okay, so I think another really great leap that happens in the program is when you get to the immersion phase. And again, this is the in-person experience here at WeWork in that room specifically back there. But the immersion phase is really about taking that sort of the mastery of hard skills and combining that with really focusing on soft skills. This is really where those two sides have to work very, very well together, because that's what being a designer is like, the practice of being a designer. So there's a little bit less about new tools and new techniques that comes up in the immersion phase. It's a lot about basically understanding that everybody knows these things already. We trust you to practice them. We trust you to understand them. You've been through the design process twice by this point. So it's really about adding things onto that, the soft skills and some of the other synthesis experiences to be a stronger designer, to become a stronger communicator. So we talk about things like team contracts, which is how your team agrees to work together, work through problems, be able to communicate with each other. It's about journaling, again, so how to write about the insights that you learned that day, or the things you need to learn for tomorrow. Creative thinking. We do a really great workshop called The Sculpt, which is always a secret until the day it's given, because it's really cool and it's about how to people can communicate with each other. We do empathy sessions where we just sit and talk about what's going on. How are you feeling? Designers never get asked how you're feeling. Designers always have to be the one to tell you how you're feeling because they're designing for you. So to be able to be asked that and talk about that is a great compliment to the entire experience of working as a designer here. And the immersion phase is where the time requirements really ramp up. We pretty much expect 60, 70, 80 hours a week is normal for the immersion phase and the client phase. And that's just a fact of life. There are a lot of deliverables. There are a lot of things that need to be done in very short amounts of time. So you have to be able to put in the time for that. And we believe that it helps tremendously to have your team, your cohort around you, to be here in this space, in this environment, to always have coffee pretty much 24 hours a day, it feels like, always available in this environment in Chicago and downtown. So we make a situation that we want people to be in, and we know they can get a lot out of it. So a few things that people do in the, more examples of things people do in the immersion phase. Another competitive synthesis, where they look at the competitors, but then they start to really be able to explain what is happening with those competitors and where is there an opportunity to do something different. Being able to whiteboard, again, just tons and tons of sketching, lots of understanding of how to work out ideas very quickly on a whiteboard. Another example of a journey map, this one is a little more detailed, it's a little more focused, because this is the second or third time that somebody's created a journey map in this program, so they're able to do this stronger and more efficiently. Another example of a paper prototype, which is something that you create and basically treat like it's an app, and you explain where there might be forms to fill out or buttons that you press, and you're able to test with this. You put this in front of somebody and say, imagine this is your app that you are going to be using. How are you going to use it, and where are there opportunities to improve it? Being able to test for usability, so successful tasks for a particular prototype. In this case, they were doing an app that has a parent feature and one that has a teacher side to it. So they were looking at successful completions and seeing that obviously there were a little bit less for the second task, or considerably less for some of those tasks for the parent prototype. So looking at the results of this and trying to figure out how they can make this better the next time they test. And there are multiple rounds of testing that happens for everybody in the immersion phase. Another example of wireframes. Not really anything new by this point, it's just getting to work on them quicker. The immersion phase is 4 weeks instead of the 6 weeks of the virtual phase. So that in itself is just being able to work faster, be able to get to the next step faster. So this is probably done in considerably less time than it was in earlier phases of the program. Understanding the difference between the versions of wireframes for your desktop and for mobile, and how they combine, how they change, how they differ or are similar between those two platforms. Creating mood boards, very similar to style tiles. These are things that just you want to be able to understand the biggest, highest level understanding of what a UI team might want to create for their product, the color palettes and the typography, the mood, the feel, and then turning them into style tiles, so converting them to specific font choices, color palettes, button shapes and sizes, other sort of design elements at a higher level to understand like how this might be able to look, and ask the client or the creative director to pick from one of these that's going to be the most successful between them. Creating a UI kit, so again, taking apart that UI design work and be able to explain how buttons work and should look, what the color palette looks like in various stages, things like that. Creating an interactive prototype, and being able to just use this as a way to not just show the micro interaction of what happens when this feature happens on this app, but also just to be able to explain, and this is maybe the entire point of this app that somebody created, is being able to give this information. I believe this project was called Can I Park Here? The answer is yes, you can park here. There you go, problem solved. And then creating a final design system, so looking at not just the key screens, but every single screen where there might be some smaller iterations between them, looking at how the color palette works across the entire system, how the typography works, everything else, to be able to present this in a form that is going to be, ultimately shows, all of the work that was accomplished in this particular project. In the immersion phase, again, lots of things that came up before. There's lots of feedback, there's lots of meetings, there's one-on-one meetings with the designer in residence and with the creative directors. There's also significant user testing opportunities. This is really where it ramps up. So everybody, both UX and UI, has to do user testing. It's incredibly important to understand how the thing you created, how it works with real people, with actual people. Sometimes they are people who really are already using this particular type of tool in some other form. The project that's given for the brief in the immersion phase that you work on for 4 weeks is a nonprofit, a pro bono, design for good, or community organization, which is really, really cool. We've worked with the Chicago Public Library. We've worked with the CTA. We worked with a dog adoption service. We're about to work with AIGA Chicago. We have a lot more that are coming up in the future. So we really like being able to work with these organizations and do something that will have a realistic but significant benefit for them. And then at every week, this is something also that's new for the immersion phases, there are sprint reviews. So every week, either on Friday or Monday, you will present your work to that point to Doug, the creative director, to the designers in residence, and be able to get detailed feedback, and we mean detailed. really, really specific detailed feedback every week to be able to know how you're doing. You get a lot of practice in presenting your work and talking about it, synthesizing the entire experience up to that point. And it's just incredibly useful. We find a lot of people get a lot out of that. When they have their final design presentation in week 16 to another guest panel of critics, they feel more comfortable with that because they've been talking about their work. They've been explaining it to themselves and to the creative directors for 4 weeks by that point. Any questions about the immersion phase? Okay. The next, second to last phase is the client phase, and that's really taking everything that you've learned and experienced up to this point and applying it outward, doing it for other people, for other companies and businesses that are out there. And so there are a few workshops that come up, but basically at this point, people are mostly done absorbing new information. Now they have to be able to apply it outward and apply it to an organization or a business, and these are actual clients that people work with, and I'll give you that list in a second. But they'll do competitive analysis, very similar to what I showed you earlier. They'll do more affinity diagrams where they're taking all these data points and being able to organize them into specific categories that they're going to be able to have insights in. Creating user personas where they identify the needs and motivations and frustrations for the ideal user for their product. Creating design principles where they're really looking specifically at what this work needs to do for the people that it's created for. They're creating mental models where they're really looking at every possible area of this and how people, what people need to use it for. They're creating user scenarios where they're understanding how somebody will use it and how somebody needs to use other tools that are related to the tool that they're building. They're creating high fidelity wireframes that may be in color where you really are able to explain to the client what these things need to look like, not just how they function. And they're creating prototypes, which are put all that work together. This is all UX work. And they'll test. This is the only video that we have in here, but she's about to point. Yep. And then, so walking somebody through the prototype they've created and being able to test it for very specific reasons to be able to give that actionable, specific, and kind feedback back to them. On the US side, there'll be a visual competitor analysis looking at all the competitors that are out there, even if they're outside the category. Everybody, by the way, loves looking at Airbnb because Airbnb's site is beautiful, it's easy to use, it's very, very well designed. So Airbnb is an endless source of inspiration for UI designers in the program. The style tile, again, you've seen this before, how the overall picture of this, this tool should look. Looking at options for logo design. Looking at the UI kits or breaking it apart into very specific features and understanding how they work together. Looking at the key screens. Creating a style guide, and this gets very, very specific. It says between this button and this button, there will be 7 pixels. And to be able to hand this off to the developer to be able to say, when you get to develop this, when you create this for real, you need to follow these particular rules. That's very important for a UI design team to figure out. So again, these are real clients. These are startups. These are MVP products. These are product companies. We've worked at Tech Week before, where they come to us with a problem and they say, we need a design team to fix this. We need a design team sometimes to just tell us what is wrong and be able to suggest next steps for it. And the real parameters that come with working with clients are awesome. Because these are actual, these are people's lives at stake, the team that they have, their jobs depend on the design work you do to be able to become more, have this company be more successful. They have a competitive advantage or disadvantage in the marketplace that your work will impact. They have competitors and they have awards sometimes and funding and other things that come with the design decisions or come after the design decisions you make. And that's great. That responsibility is awesome because that's what it's like as a professional designer. And there are very few programs like ours and design boot camps that offer a live client experience. This is absolutely one of the biggest differentiators for Designation. Because you're working with live clients, we make sure that you continue the weekly presentations directly to those client stakeholders. You do this twice because this phase is 6 weeks, you do 2 3-week projects. The first week, the creative director, in this case Dan, and we have Megan, who is elsewhere in the building, they kind of lead the team and make sure that they set up the team for success. In that second client project, they turn it over to the design team. And the design team says, okay, we're going to walk you through this. We know how to, we've understood your problem and your situation, and we have created this design work for that. That's an awesome ability to be able to do that after just a few weeks in this phase. And there's a really, really good likelihood of having the work that you create for these clients actually go live. These are real clients. They have real needs. They have a real product that needs updates and needs revisions and iterations. We have the opportunity to provide that for them. And as a designer, anybody who's out there who's already a designer in some capacity knows that when you create something, you bring it to life and it exists out in the world, you can tell your parents, this is what I do all day. I don't just draw shit. Like that's a big deal. Like to be able to be proud of that, know that it lives out there and it will be improved upon. You may be able to do that in the future. That's really, really cool. In the last 2 years and 2 months, we've worked with these clients. And we've worked with clients from the very beginning, 4 years, but this is, I couldn't look at our Google Calendar anymore after looking up this list. Yeah, we have crazy records here, but a lot, go ahead.
2014, we, I think, worked with, and this was like a few months ago, I counted up over 150 different clients.
Yeah.
So upwards from there.
A lot of these you have probably never heard of because these may be one-person companies. It's somebody with a dream that they're trying to get off the ground. It may be a company of 5 or 10 people. Some of these have gone out of business. Some of these have gone on Shark Tank, and they've gotten investments from pretty famous people. They've won Startup Incubator Awards and other really cool things. And they run the gamut from all kinds of companies. We have a bunch that are wines. I have no idea why we're like the digital design service for the wine industry, but we have like 4 or 5 in here. Client that's working on right now is Private Flight Club. They offer private jet transport for people. That's really awesome. We've had, what else? Story Street Labs is a place for you to post your fan fiction. And that's a need that a lot of people have. It's really, really cool. And so many more. And we work with 5 or 6 clients at any given time. And the range of those clients is incredible. And so you are able to work with a client that maybe you already know that industry and you know it well and you are a subject matter expert and somebody who can speak to this industry. Maybe you're really new in it and you get a really awesome immersive dive into what they do and how they need to be different and what you can do for them. And that's really cool. If you know nothing about the client, you will become an expert in them very, very quickly and you will create for them. And that's awesome to be able to do that. So again, these are all these clients we work with at a 3-week, in a 3-week time span. We frequently work with clients multiple times. So we'll do a UX research project for 3 weeks, then a UX design project, and then maybe a UI project. And maybe a few months later, they'll come back and say, well, now we need a B2B version of our app instead of a B2C version that you already did for us. And we have long-standing relationships with a lot of these, and they've come back multiple times. They are thrilled about the work that we're able to provide because our people are committed. They are absolutely committed to working and creating this thing for them because they know how important it is to design for other people. They know how important it is to create something that's going to work, that's going to achieve that competitive advantage. So our designers in our program give it their all, and they love working on these projects, and the clients are incredibly appreciative of it. This is a big part of the experience here. We really are proud of it. We're proud that from the very first cohort, we've been able to have live client work. The types of clients that we work with, and maybe you are one of these people, but we have early stage minimum viable products who are in search of validation and definition to make sure that their idea for their product is actually doable. We work with live products, apps, and websites that already exist that may need usability testing and may need refinements. Sometimes they're just not that great. They're not that strong. We all know tools that we use that are not that well designed. Sometimes they'll just come to us and say, we need to make this sharper. We need to understand our audience more. We need to create additional features. And there will also be existing products that need to evolve or expand their functionality. Again, they may have one platform and they need a complementary platform. They may have a website and they need an app. They may have a B2B version, they need a B2C version. So the ability to work with everything that already exists is really great because you have a wealth of knowledge from which to base your design decisions upon. Any questions about the client phase? If anybody in the room is interested in becoming a client, we are always accepting new clients to work with, again, 5 or 6 at a time. And we have a form that's designation.io/RFP. If you know anybody or work with anybody or have a friend or a family member who could use a service like Designation, it's totally free. Again, this is here to provide as good an experience as possible for our designers in the program. So if you would like to pass this on to them, please feel free to do so. This is the form that everybody fills out to become a client for Designation. Okay, last phase of the program, the career phase. And again, this is the last 2 weeks of the program that are really different. It's much more about communication than design. It's really about understanding your own personal goals for your design career and setting those goals and then achieving them through many, many different ways. So there are lots of things that come up in this phase that are very different, like setting up a portfolio site, being able to create case studies, how to get through a design interview because it's very different from a design presentation. Meeting with your career mentor and having a career mentor, getting mock interviews. Lots of features that are very specific to this career phase because it's really different. And what people create out of the career phase are things like case studies, where this might be something they did in a client project or in the immersion phase, but they have to synthesize it and be able to present it even better and, and more effectively in the case study. They are also documenting the process. I joke with everybody that a picture of you pointing at a wall of Post-its is like gold, especially if you wear glasses. You look really smart because you're like, oh, data, there's lots of data here. Oh, it's very fascinating. You create insights where you talk about a step you took, which card sorting is a big step in the UX design process. You set out a bunch of cards for somebody as they're testing and say, arrange these cards in the order in which it makes sense. Every page on a website has a different card and you want them to be able to intuitively grasp how it's supposed to work. Well, that's the step that you take in the project. In the case study, you have to be able to write about the takeaway and synthesize the results of that. So say, in this case, they decided to avoid grouping devices. That's a big part of the case study creation, is being able to write about those insights and be able to explain them very thoroughly. It's about showing the evolution of your work. So you started with a paper prototype, you went to a wireframe, you did more high fidelity versions. This ends up being a UI project. And be able to showcase the changes that happen at each step very, very efficiently, very, very quickly. It's about presenting your key screens in ways that are maybe a little more visually interesting to the viewer. So how can you show them in ways that aren't just sort of static screens on your portfolio? It's creating a portfolio site. Look, it's a picture of a guy pointing at a wall of Post-its. I'm telling you people, like, it works. So this is how he organizes information. He talks about himself. Jeff is a designer at Redbox now, so he's doing really well. He's about 2 years out of the program. Also, you talk about yourself in ways that introduce your background, some of the experiences you had or careers you had before design, and how it impacted you at every step. And so somebody went from being a life coach to a financial services provider. She founded a line of cocktail and soda syrups and then became a UX designer. And again, there's so many changes in her career that this allowed her to think on so many different levels of what it was like to design for other people, because she was constantly solving problems for them in other ways. Another example of a personal statement. This guy is an artist. He worked in Berlin, New York, and Atlanta before coming to Designation. He's now at Nielsen, which is a giant consultancy, and he loves drawing ugly fellas, as he says. And you create a resume. This is where you put all of the information about your career in the past, all the way including your design work. But it all matters. It all allows you to talk about your proficiency in various skills and tools. Some of your client experiences and dropping some of those names, some of the other relevant experience that is important to your design career. It's all valuable, and a resume is a way to do that at a glance. The career phase has some unique features to them. Supplemental activities give you a lot of perspectives on your job search. So you hear from alums, you hear from interviewers, recruiting agencies, hiring managers. You hear from a lot of other people on studio tours who provide you different perspectives and allow you to understand what your job search might be like. It's highly personalized because everybody comes into the program with different experiences, and everybody's going to leave the program wanting something different. A career in UX or product design or research or education or nonprofits, or the sky's the limit. So everybody has their own professional values that are highly individual, and they have to be able to design and create for those values to be able to achieve those values. Also, career materials that get developed, your resume and your portfolio, your case studies, and your LinkedIn, you basically can use that for decades to come. And it's a really great way to get started in creating these things and build the basis for the tools that you will use for your second job, your third job, your fourth job, and so on. Any questions about the career phase? Okay, so really quickly, I just want to talk about post-graduation. After, this is not an official phase of the program, but it's a really important feature of Designation because we definitely keep tabs on everybody who graduates. We want them to be a part of this sort of alumni family, and then we want them to continue learning. So there are lots and lots of opportunities ahead, and be able to pick up those processes and those practices that people can continue for the rest of their career. They start here. These are a lot of our hiring partners, not everybody. This is probably another 150 hiring partners. Everyone from Apple to Bose to Lyft to Sears to United Airlines to Uptake, agencies, in-house teams, product companies. There's lots of different places that our graduates go to. These are places around the world. We have people in Dublin and Paris and Mexico City and California, which may as well be a different country, and Alaska. We have somebody in Anchorage, which is crazy. But lots of places hire our graduates because they're ready for these experiences. They're ready to work in an agency or be a part of an in-house team or work sometimes freelance or contract. It depends on what their individual values are, and it's really important for them to have figured out by the time they graduate. After graduation, everybody gets 4 weeks of one-on-one meetings with the creative director to review the career materials. So there's lots of ways to keep that momentum going after the program ends. We have a really thriving job board that's exclusively for designation. We have it on our Slack channel. If you use Slack, I'm pretty familiar with that. We also give everybody a career mentor. So in the area in which they want to focus professionally, or their city they want to live in, or something else that's going to be a good unifier between them and the designer, we give them a mentor that's one-on-one and works with them for several weeks after graduation. That mentor is an excellent bridge between the program and their first job. So we really like being able to provide that. We have 140 mentors that we work with all over the world, and they love working with designation designers because they are ready to work. Occasionally, we have a mentor that gets a mentee a job at a company or works with them in some capacity. It's always great when it happens, but we unfortunately can't guarantee it. And that leads to a big caveat here that is also a difference between us and other boot camps. There are lots of boot camps out there that say you will get a job after graduation. And anyone who tells you that is crazy. They cannot guarantee that. There's no way they can guarantee that. So we also say that. We say we can't guarantee you a job after graduation. We have to make that statement because it's true. We cannot guarantee a job. The work is on you. The work is on you to be able to get through the program and keep up the momentum, keep up that lifetime of learning, keep up all the skills and staying up with the skills and the tools that are out there. We can guarantee, and we do guarantee, that we teach you everything you need to get a job on your own. And so another value that I didn't talk about earlier, but is self-sufficiency. Self-sufficiency is not being on your own. It is not being pushed out of the plane and have to kind of, find your way to the ground automatically. It's about teaching yourself the skills to work on your own and to be effective on your own, to keep up with any deadlines that come up, to stay learning and stay motivated, and be excited about the things that come up after this program. Designation sometimes feels like a cocoon. It's like an experience that you get that's very different, especially if you move to Chicago, and it's like a very self-contained experience. But really, designation is the beginning of the rest of your career. It emulates the design experience more than any other program we know of out there. So we can't give you a job after graduation, but we give you all the skills and tools that you need, all the perspectives, all the insights from 4 years of our experience and 471 graduates, everything that you need to get a job. And so because of that, because the onus is on the individual designer, at the moment, 95.9% of our graduates get jobs within 6 months of graduation. So that sometimes is, that's about an average. Sometimes that takes 6 months, or it takes 8 or 9 months. Sometimes it takes 1 week. We've seen people get jobs before the program ended. That's very, very rare, but it has happened in the past. Depending on all of your individual experiences and your background and what you want from this experience. But you have the support, you have the community, you have the network, you have all the tools and the resources to be able to get that job after graduation. And that means that our graduates are, again, all over the world. They come from everywhere, they go everywhere. We just had somebody take a job in Seoul, Korea, at a place called Egbun Education. She's going to be teaching English at the same time as she's doing UX, which is pretty awesome for her company. And we have somebody in New Zealand. There's an organization called CIR, the Council on Integrity and Results Reporting, that nobody in this room probably has heard of yet, but it's a great third-party organization that helps create standardized outcome reporting across as many boot camps and immersive programs like ours as possible. We've joined this, we're a provisional member right now, and we're gonna have our first reporting in March, and we'll become full members of SIR. We really believe that it's important to have transparent, detailed information about our hiring outcomes, and that includes people who got hired, people who didn't want to apply for a job. They went back to their previous field before design. They got an internship, they got a contract role, they got an apprenticeship. There's all kinds of nuance in hiring. So it's not just get a job or didn't get a job. So again, any boot camp out there, any program out there who says that it's a difference between a yes job or not a job, that is not a very good way to talk about the ways that people come out of programs like ours. So this is really valuable for us. We're going to talk much more about this on our website in the coming months, and really, make sure that everybody knows our information about our outcomes that comes out. Now, let's talk about money. Who wants to talk about money? The overall fee for designation is $15,800. It comes in 2 payments. Correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but there's 2 payments. The first payment is $1,000. When you apply to the program and you get accepted, this is basically a down payment where you need to put that down to be able to get into Design Essentials and start work on the program. After Design Essentials ends, that's when the remaining balance, the $14,800, is due. So you have to be able to pay all of that by the end of the program. I think there's 1 payment, 2 payments?
1 payment.
1 payment.
You can pay monthly if necessary.
Yeah. So that is an important element of the program. Obviously, it's like being able to understand the payment. So that, again, the total cost is $15,800. This is a comparison chart that we publish on our website, but we know that there are lots of costs out there. There's lots of differentiators between designation and other programs similar to us. You look at, General Assembly, it's 10 weeks compared to ours is 24 weeks. You look at Center, they're $60,000, and they're in Chattanooga because they're a 2-year program. They take 90 weeks of your life. So if you look at various elements here, we are the second cheapest of our competitors, the second least expensive at $659 per week because it's 24 weeks. Look at the total cost between designation and General Assembly, and the difference between that's 10 weeks. We are 24 weeks, so you get a lot more value for that. We are not the best or the cheapest in certain of these categories, but we really, really stand by our program, and we have built it as such. We used to be 10 weeks, and we realized nobody was going to get a job. Nobody was going to feel like they really achieved being a designer by the end of it. We moved to 12 weeks, and then 18 weeks, and then 24 weeks. So we're continually making improvements, and because we are a very small organization, we have this location here in Chicago, we're able to make improvements that's really fast and be able to make changes when we see a competitor like Center come up, or a competitor like GA start to offer client projects, and we stand behind us being better and stronger than what they are.
One thing to know about Design Essentials is that it is a $1,000 down payment, and then it's a 6-week program that is worth well in excess of $1,000. If you sign up for General Assembly and interview and you get accepted, which you will, because they accept everyone, you'll pay $15,000 or $13,950, and then you're locked in. With this, you're going to get that 6 weeks of part-time online Design Essentials, and you're going to get the foundation of the program. Just so it may happen that you might not like this stuff, and you can opt out from the larger expense. So we built that as a 2-way agreement between us and you, where we get to observe how interested you are in the field, how talented you are, and vice versa. So,
yeah, absolutely. We have a couple of financing partners because this question comes up a lot. $15,000 is quite a lot of money, and we know that. There are 2 partners we work with, Skills Fund and Climb. They're at climbcredit.com. Skills Fund is skills.fund. And they work pretty exclusively with immersive programs like ours, boot camps like ours, design and dev, and some other tech industries. So they are really built for that. And they offer you some tools here. They're able to tell you some information pretty easily. And they offer loans that, about a third of our designers have taken advantage of one or the other of these. So we have a considerable number of people who've worked with these partners, and we can tell you more about them later on in the application process. So upcoming cohorts, in case you're curious. Hopefully some of you are thinking about strongly applying, but our Garnet cohort, actually the final date to apply is this Friday?
Yeah.
This Friday. Because Design Essentials starts on February 26th and goes until August 24th. Our Hyacinth cohort is the next one to start. It starts on April 16th and it runs until October 12th. Final date to apply is April 6th. We have one person in Hyacinth right now, Jimmy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that you?
Yeah.
Jimmy, all right. Congratulations. Don't let Jimmy go through the program alone, people. Join Hyacinth. It's a Hyacinth cohort. And then looking later on, the Indigo cohort, which we're not accepting applications for quite yet, but we will. That starts on June 4th if you want to look ahead, and it runs until December 7th. This is our final cohort of 2018. So yeah, they're all color-coded. We work with colors. This is our second run through the color alphabet. So it's Garnets are like, what, 32nd cohort, I think, 33rd cohort. And they occasionally get difficult to keep track of, but everybody gets a t-shirt of the color of your cohort. So that's exciting. If you really like purple, spoiler alert, you're gonna get a purple t-shirt. Another caveat, as Aaron said, there are other programs out there that will accept everyone who applies, and we are not one of those places. Only about 75% of applicants are accepted to the program. And that's because we have fairly high standards. We have a reputation as being the best program in the world for UX and UI. We've heard that from a number of hiring partners and a number of recruiting agencies that work with us. And we need to make sure that we stand behind the quality of everybody who leaves this program. So there are people that we do not accept in the admissions process, in the interview process. And there are occasionally, very rarely, but occasionally some people that we will ask to leave the program because they are damaging their experience, they're damaging the experience of their team or their cohort, and or they just don't care that much. They're not showing that they care that much. What we look for in applicants, this is just a small list of things, but we ask for some experience in the areas in which, you know, these are maybe more soft skills than hard skills, but learning by doing, being able to resolve conflicts, being able to think creatively, being able to have objectivity about your own work, thinking about directions forward for your career and self-reflection. We will ask questions about this in the interview process. We will ask you about your experiences in them. We will ask those hard questions like, when you failed, the last time you failed, what was that like? How did you get over that? We want people with some good experience in managing their time because that's an absolute requirement for designation. Active listening, being professional, making decisions and understanding the ramifications of those decisions, being self-sufficient, having a growth mindset, ready to collaborate. And we want people with a lot of experience in being self-aware, knowing what you want, what you're good at, what you're bad at, where you have opportunity to grow. Having motivation, self-motivation to be able to work when you've been coming into this space for 80 hours a week for 11 weeks. You need the motivation to be able to keep coming in and get the job done, and just giving a shit. And that's not just like giving a shit about something that's outside. It's about yourself. It's about taking care of yourself. It's about the people that you're going to design for, the people you're going to design with on your team. It's about the work and diving in and making sure that, you know, if it's an area that is a client project that is really difficult to understand or frankly not that engaging, that you make a lot of it, that you make the most of it. And that means that we have three types of applicants. You'll see here career starters. These are people with minimal job or design experience. They're people who maybe are coming out of college. Maybe they're coming out of grad school. Maybe they never went to college and they were self-trained. Maybe they're people who had just very little, they kind of work temporary jobs or service jobs. We have career switchers, and these are people with a professional background that may be years or decades. And it's probably not related to design in any capacity, but they're interested in design. They're really curious about design. And we have advancers, which are people who have a background in design, graphic design, sometimes product design. We have people like these, motion designers, art directors, design strategists, people who are kind of close to design. They understand a lot of the practice behind it. Again, lots of career switchers. I can't leave the pastry chef out of this because that's my favorite example of somebody, and he's in this room, actually. Again, career starters, these are people who maybe are new college graduates, they're high school graduates. We've had 2 18-year-olds come through the program. That was highly fascinating. And people who had temporary job holders. They had never written papers before. They had never fixed thoughts on their own. Everything was a right or wrong answer, and it's super fascinating to work with somebody who's never had to understand ambiguity before. Just as an aside. This is what the process looks like in very, very basic terms about the application process. So you fill an application at designation.io/apply. Maybe some of you, Jimmy certainly has, looked at that page before and applied. So that's the page where everybody needs to go to. The application takes about 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes. Actually, it's really short. It's really quick. We just want to get basic information from you. Want to know what cohort you're interested in doing, if it's Garnet or Hyacinth. And everybody gets an interview from the admissions team. So when your application comes in, you get an email pretty quickly that says, we would like to meet you. We want to talk with you. We want to interview you. We want to hear more about you. We want to know what you're looking for out of this program. And so everybody gets an interview no matter what. We get plenty of people who never respond to the interview request. We get, obviously a lot of people do want to get that interview and talk with us. That could be in person, so you'll come back to WeWork. You'll be walking around here. You might be sitting over here or somewhere else in the building, or it's virtual. You know, if you live in the suburbs or you work a day job or whatever else, we can do that through Google Hangout. There are 3 things that come out of that interview with the admissions team. If the applicant shows strong potential for success, that's a green light. Applicant shows some potential for success, that's a yellow light. And then if there's little potential for success, that's something that we see as just sort of probably not likely to result in being able to join the program. So you get the green light, that's accepted to the full program. You get sent the paperwork to be able to join the program. You get sent the invoice for $1,000 from the Design Essentials invoice, and you're able to join join a cohort that you want to join. If you have some of that potential for success, there are 2 steps that you may be asked to take. The first is to join what we call self-paced Design Essentials. It's the same curriculum as our guided Design Essentials, but it's done at your own pace. So we understand that some people may not be able to even commit the 10 to 20 hours needed for Design Essentials. So if they need to work at a slower pace or work only on weekends, they're given access to the self-paced Design Essentials curriculum. There are occasional meetings with the creative director as part of that. But at the end of that, their results are evaluated, the projects and the work is evaluated, and they're able to make a determination of whether they're able to be accepted or denied to the program. We also may ask you to fill out a design challenge. If you have no real experience with design, if you have a difficult time in the interview showing design thinking or the ability to kind of think about the design parts of decisions that you make, a design challenge is an exercise that demonstrates critical thinking and communication skills. It really does not require previous design knowledge to be able to do it, but we call it a design challenge because that's a term that's used in this industry quite often. So you'll have 5 days to return it. You get the document, have 5 days to return it. It's evaluated and returned back to you in a few days. That will be evaluated, and your decision may be to be accepted into the program or denied out of the program. But that's something that if we send you a design challenge, we definitely expect that to be filled out within 5 days. And if the person is denied admission to the full program, we send you a reading list, and we send you a lot of information and say, we really encourage you to learn more about design, learn more about digital design, some of the publications and best practices that are out there. So you're able to reapply in 6 months. We want you to be serious about learning more about the industry. Even just the baseline, resources that are out there, some of the most famous books and blogs and other practices. You don't have to become a designer in that time, but we do expect you to learn more about that. And we want you to come back. If you're serious about it, we want you to come back. We want to meet you again and ask how things have been going and whether or not this is going to be a really good experience for you. Another caveat here, participation in Design Essentials is only granted through admission to the full designation program. So no one is able to just enter DE. You have to be admitted to the entire program. That's the only way to get into DE, Design Essentials. So as Aaron mentioned, you're able to quit after Design Essentials. If you say, you know what, I just want to learn a bunch of things and then I can't really do the full program, that's okay, but you have to be admitted to the full program. We don't have a separate admissions process just for Design Essentials, so please keep that in mind. It does mean that, again, you don't have to necessarily commit to the whole 24 weeks, but you have to be able to, if that's what you're looking for, that's what you can plan for. Almost done. A couple of contact forms if you would like to reach out to us. Courtney over here is our community director, community manager, and she is the person to speak with if you want to learn more about the program and apply. Dan over here is our creative director for the client phase. If you want to work with us as a client or know somebody who does, have them contact Dan. And myself, my last name is Josie here, Josse at Designation.io. If you want to work with a graduate, if anybody you know wants to hire someone who's come out of Designation as a UX, UI, or product designer, or researcher, interaction designer, or whatever, either contract or a full-time role, please come talk to me. I love being able to match people, our graduates, to jobs that are out there, no matter if they are contract or full-time. Please also connect with us online. We publish a lot of information on social media, facebook.com/designation, twitter.com/designation.io, instagram.com/designation.io. We love being in this space. We take a lot of pictures of it. We love our people, take a lot of pictures of them. We talk about their process. We talk about their joys. We talk about their presentations. And we celebrate them as much as we can on a daily basis. So tune into these because we love broadcasting on them. We love people using them and learning more about Designation because this is a fantastic way to learn what the day-to-day experience is like, what some of the deliverables and the insights are like on a daily basis. Another way to learn about Designation is to go to these sites. CourseReport.com is an excellent site for boot camps and programs like Designation. We currently have 66 reviews of the program from graduates of Designation that are there. You can learn a tremendous amount about Designation just by reading those experiences. They are honest and they are detailed. They are not always, super happy, positive. And that's great. We want them to be detailed and honest. So that's as useful as possible for you. SwitchUp.org is another site that's similar to Course Report, talks about a lot of programs like ours. We have 39 reviews of the program from graduates on there, but we have just about a 5-star review from there. And then our blog, designation.io/blog, we publish a lot of alumni interviews from graduates who've gotten settled at their first or second job. And we want them to talk about their experiences in the program, after the program, starting out with their job, and be able to give paint as much of a picture as possible about what it's like to be a professional designer. So that's another resource always available to you. We add these every week or two, and we really love being able to show them to all of you. Lastly, Designation, I mentioned this at the beginning, but Designation is not the step you take before starting as a designer. Designation is the first step as a designer you take as a designer if you're not already one. It's the first step you take as a career in digital design. And we have heard from so many graduates and so many hiring partners that Designation designers and graduates are really well prepared for this industry. And we believe in that. We build our entire curriculum and all of our successes on that. And that's a big deal for us. So we make sure that it is as much of your first experience as a professional designer as possible if you haven't had one yet. That is all the content that I have today. If anyone would like to ask some questions, talk about yourself, talk about your experiences, we'd love to do some Q&A right now. Yes.
Are you able to do the design essentials and then do a different program later? Like you stop after that?
You can, yes. So you are able to do design essentials with, let's say, the Garnet cohort. And if something comes up where you need to go focus on, your job, or you have family commitments or something else, you can take that some time off and rejoin Hyacinth for their virtual phase. That is possible to you. And we have a limit on how long you can go between skips like that. I think it's like 6 months. Then you have to reapply to the program because we made so many changes to the curriculum that we want you to have the most up-to-date version.
So is it only available after the design essentials? So not like after, say, virtual phase?
Correct, because that's when the full-time program begins and you just really go through it. There are extenuating circumstances in which somebody can stop at virtual and then pick back up with a later cohort, but usually that's like death in the family or medical emergency, something like that. We really encourage people to go through the full 18 weeks at that point. Oh, questions from the streamers. Yeah.
We have one virtual question, and it's how did Designation go about putting together the Design Essentials curriculum?
So I will let James cover any information that I'm not able to provide. But the short answer to this is that this is part of how we went from being a 10 or 12 week program to being a 24-week program. When you think about all the information that you have to gain over the course of a program like ours, it's a ton. And to be able to just parse out that information, be able to handle each one at any given time, be able to understand how they build upon each other and how to really utilize that information in action, it takes a long time to do that. And it takes repetition to be able to get comfortable with that. What we found is before we had Design Essentials at the beginning, it was too much of a shock to get started with the virtual phase. And we kind of expected people to go from like 0 to 30 and not 0 to 60, but like to hit the ground walking, if not running. And it was a very difficult, jarring transition because it was also going from 0 hours of work to doing 40 hours a week in that virtual phase. So we realized after several cohorts that we really needed to figure out what could be that thing that comes before the virtual phase. How can we get people to have a slower ramp up to be able to get the concepts? So instead of practicing the concepts immediately, you learn the concepts in Design Essentials and then practice them starting with the virtual phase. So to be able to have an easier into the program, an easier way to understand all the things that you need to learn, and really be more, that allowed us people to feel more comfortable, more confident in their work and be able to take on the virtual phase even better. Anything missing on that, James?
No, that's pretty bulletproof, I'd say. But if you have any questions, definitely come at me.
Yeah. And DE, Design Essentials started really, what, like a year and a half ago?
Yeah.
So it is not something that's been around forever. Like that's a big, one of our biggest iterations to be able to create that phase and make sure that it's effective and really, build in the curriculum step by step and make sure that it sort of mimics the virtual phase and that every week has a different theme to it and that week's theme builds upon the previous weeks.
So do you divide people into teams in the virtual phase or when does it start?
Yes, so teamwork starts in the virtual phase for sure. Starting on that day one, you are assigned a team. And so again, the UX folks have their own instructor and they have their own graders and they have their own Slack channel and their own projects and everything. The UX folks have all of those things, but just for UI. So you're able to work specifically if you're in UX, you're working specifically with UX designers. If you're in UI, you're working specifically with UI designers. That team is anywhere from 2 to 4 people, depending on how many people are in your track of your cohort. Sometimes it can be a very small number. Sometimes it can be, a great number.
Speaking of, we have another question from virtual, which is how many people are in a cohort?
How many people are in a cohort? We just graduated a cohort of 7, and the next one that's about to start the virtual phase is 24. So that is the range. We like 16 to 24 is the range that we like. That usually means a split of UX and UI. It means multiple teams on each side so people can really interact with each other and get the most out of the experience.
So how do you guys divide the teams? Like random numbers?
So the question is, how do we divide teams? It changes from phase to phase. In virtual, it's mostly like we look at some background information and things, but there's a lot of crapshoots that are involved because the virtual creative directors and the team, they're learning how people learn, how people talk about themselves, how people work. And so over the course of that 6 weeks, they'll work on a team and we'll identify, good parts and bad parts of that team makeup. When they're about to move from the virtual phase to the immersion phase, the immersion creative director, in this case Doug, will sit down with the virtual instructors and say, who worked well together? Who worked badly together? Where might there be opportunity? Who is somebody who is really boisterous and who's somebody who's really quiet? And how can we find opportunities for them to impact each other? Or are they like, acids and bases and they'll just explode if they work together? So we do a lot of research and then in that. And so in immersion, when they are in person, they're working that 70, 80 hours a week, that their team is as harmonious, but also I think challenging in some good ways as possible. When it comes time to for the client phase, Dan and Megan sit down with Doug and say who worked well together, who worked poorly together. And we'll do that, repeatedly so that we make teams that are, again, as effective as possible, but there is some challenge that might be a part of that. The goal is for everybody in UX to work with each other in some capacity, everyone in UI to work together in some capacity.
So you guys change teams from virtual to immersion?
Yes. Oh yeah. Unless there's only, 2 or 3 people in one track, then there just aren't the numbers to support having them work on separate teams or be able to mix them up. And that has happened. It's happening right now, actually, that we have a UI, the cohort that's going through the UI folks. There's only 3 of them. They've been working together nonstop since the beginning. So we're glad they like each other. That's great. Yeah.
Does the UI UX, do they ever collaborate, or is it always separate?
Yes, but in kind of different ways. So first of all, when you're in the room together, like there's a UX team and a UI team and a UX team and a UI team, and they all intermingle. There's a lot that happens with just osmosis. When you're in the same room as somebody else, when somebody is next to you is working on something different, you talk about it together. You find out what they're doing. You hear about that. We have weekly peer feedback sessions where every Wednesday morning at 10:15, we have all the UX and UI people get together, get in groups, and they present what they're working on to each other. So the UI person is going to give feedback to the UX designer. The UX designer is going to give feedback to the UI designer on their work, things like that. We also do design challenges every Friday afternoon where there's sometimes a fun, sometimes a serious exercise for an hour where we mix everybody together and they work together to create potential ideas and solutions. We also, in the immersion phase, actually in immersion and client phases, often you'll do, as a UI designer, you'll do work that the UX team did in a previous cohort. So there's a lot of handoff that's discussed there, and the UI folks always work with annotated wireframes that a UX team creates. UXers are able to understand what the UI team creates from their work. So there's a lot of that knowledge that's built in also. But directly collaborating on a project, no, that will never happen. And that's mainly due to the scope of the projects we work on. Like you can only do 3 weeks of work for a client project at a time. So there's not really time to do both UX and UI together.
We've got another virtual question. Do students get a set lunch break during immersion phase, and is there food provided?
Thank you for the food is a very valuable part of the designation experience. As you can see right here, donuts are big, and those donuts have not been eaten, people. I'm very disappointed. There is not a set lunchtime, and that's because every team is kind of working on their own schedule. We have check-ins in the morning and in the afternoon, and that's with the creative director, with the designer residents, or with each other. But they're basically in the middle of the day, they're on their own timeline. So they're constantly having to figure out when they need to take a break, when's most advantageous for them. Is it between tests or between interviews? So they have to be able to do that themselves. We bring in food on orientation, and every so often, and there's quite a lot of food in WeWork that comes up every so often. And again, we have water and coffee and beer and a few other things that come up, but we do not usually provide food. And that's one of the good reasons why we're downtown, is that there are food options everywhere downtown. Very easy to get to. We work with, a lot of people use MealPal, which is a great app to find like deals of the day at local restaurants. We use Ritual. Ritual is a good partnership with WeWork, so everybody gets a good deal on those, and a lot of other restaurants out there. Please.
Virtual's heating up.
Awesome.
We've got 2 more questions. Does tuition include any required software, Adobe, Sketch, etc.?
It does not. Tuition does not include pieces of software, but we have deals with, I think, every single software creator that we use, except for Adobe, although people can get occasionally the student discount for Adobe, which is significant. But we have InVision, Sketch, Principal, Proto.io, I think. They're all significantly discounted because we arrange those discounts. Again, we have Apple for the laptop is a significant discount there. You get, if you want a .design domain name, so if you want your name to be Joe Smith at .design for your portfolio URL, you get the first year for free. So we have a lot of partners that we work with that we really are pleased to have those with, but we do not offer anything alongside, like within that tuition fee.
Great. Another question, are there particular areas of the program you are currently in the process of improving or interested in improving?
We are always improving the program, but it's usually in very small ways. Ways that you almost can't even tell that they're happening. So a big part of that is feedback, like not just you as the designer in the program getting feedback, but we ask for feedback a lot because we also give you feedback on the work that you're doing. So the feedback we ask for is, what's happening in this phase? Are you getting what you need out of it? How did the previous phase prepare you for this one? How is this one going to prepare you for the next one? Lots and lots of questions we ask for in exit interviews and in surveys, in one-on-one conversations that we have, in the empathy sessions where we talk with the full cohort at any given time. We absolutely need that feedback. We need that honest, detailed feedback from people. And that we use that to make the changes. So if we need to move a workshop from week 14 to week 13, if we need to add a guest speaker to talk about grids or micro interactions, if we need to have a particular studio tour happen that people ask for, we'll make that happen. So we absolutely love getting feedback from people. We basically demand it because that's a really important part of making sure that everybody gets what they need out of designation.
And I think this is the last one. Can you talk a little about the professional growth you see designers gain as a result of the program?
It is staggering to see that. I think, when we look at the three types of people who come to the program, the career starters, the career switchers, and the career advancers, everybody in each of those phases certainly has different, stages of their career, has different needs from designation, and they have different levels of professional experience. It's really cool to see people who have never done design before come into designation and get a design job out of it. And it's really, a big part of the 24 weeks that we have is, again, the repetition of experiences. And we see people get more and more comfortable doing that. We've definitely seen people be terrified the first time they have to give a presentation. But because they do it 4 times in the immersion phase, they do it 6 times, I think, in the client phase. That's in the span of 12 weeks or 10 weeks, that's 10 times where you practice the ability to give a presentation. We see people get more comfortable with that week by week. We see people have confidence in their decision-making abilities because sometimes we kind of force it to happen. You have a week to do something in Design Essentials, and it becomes 3 days to do something in the virtual phase, and it becomes 1 day to do that same thing in the immersion phase, and become very, very quick in the client phase. So over time, we see people make decisions faster. We allow them to have the confidence and the skill set to be able to make those decisions faster, get to a point where they're more comfortable with things, and we see that over and over again. So again, I talked about having 18-year-olds come through the program. We had one who came right from high school, and he said, "College is not for me. I want to be able to do this." And he did a great job in the program. We asked him to stick around for 9 months, I think. He was a designer in residence, and he just worked with cohort after cohort, helping people because he had the confidence. He was a serious introvert guy, really, really serious. And he was able to work with people and sort of become very beloved cohort after cohort. He's now an active campaign. And he's been there for 1.5 years now, I think, and he's doing great. We hear great things about him from people who work around him. So we see that growth. It's hard to measure, it's hard to talk about, but we see it happen. And the best way that we encourage people to understand for themselves how they grew is to journal, to keep a record of those insights, to be able to understand, okay, 4 weeks ago I was struggling with X. Have I achieved it? Do I understand it? Is it an innate part of my professional experience or my decision-making process? We also encourage people to, when they write their case studies, this is a big one, they write their case studies in the career phase, they're working on projects that they did in the client, immersion, or virtual phases. They're reviewing the work they did, all the deliverables, their process, and they're talking about it, and they actually cringe sometimes at the work they did in those earlier projects. And that's really, I hate to see it, but I also love to see it because it means they know how much better they've gotten. And that happens a lot. People just go, man, I wish I could do this again. And some of them actually will. They'll go back to that old project and revisit it and make it stronger, make it better, make it more user focused, make it add elements and features, whatever. And that's really cool. So it happens. Thank you for the question. It happens. And it sometimes can be hard to measure, but we encourage people to keep aware of themselves and their growth because we want them to see it too. Any other questions in the room? Yeah.
What's a typical day in general? Is it more you're always with clients, or you said there's events? What's
So that also changes phase to phase. I would say the cohort that's in here now, they're in their second week of the client phase. So their typical day is we do a morning huddle at 10 a.m. So we talk about the day's activities, what's coming up in the week, things to remember. we'll do stretching or, you know, some goofy activities, sometimes headspace meditation type thing. Then they do their check-in with Caitlin and with Dan, the creative director. So they'll go around and talk about what they're working on. That's sort of a way of like, what are you going to work on today? What's this day look like for you? Then they go off on their individual tangents. So they'll do interviews, they'll do testing off-site. They may do things internally here. They may just spend the day working, but they'll do another check-in in the afternoon. And then some days we have workshops where 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, something will happen. We'll bring in a guest speaker. We do those every Thursday, for example. And we'll have some sort of supplemental activity that helps them kind of end the day.
That goes to like 9 o'clock?
Yeah, our working hours here are 10 a.m. to 9 p.m.
And you guys are here till 9?
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? Well, then thank you very much. Please feel free to stick around. We will be here for a little while. Happy to talk with anybody one-on-one if you'd like. Again, James, Dan, Doug, Courtney, Sarah, Caitlin, and I'm Mike. We really appreciate you guys coming tonight. We hope we've given you a lot of good information about the program. If you haven't signed in yet, please do so. We'd like to know if there's any questions we can answer for you afterward. And we have some drinks and donuts here. We have a couple of grads in the audience. That's Mary Brown over there in the big scarf. And Stas Horta over here sitting out. He's the pastry chef. Ask him what it's like to go from a pastry chef to a UI designer. Thank you everybody very much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. Have a good one.